Shalom, Shalom and welcome. Welcome to White Robes family. This is part of the Judgment Warning Instruction Series. My brothers and sisters, the scriptures tell us that Yahuah, the Almighty Creator, He who is the beginning and the end, the scriptures inform us that He is a consuming fire. It informs us of discipline for His children, those whom He loves, as written in Hebrews 12th chapter and Revelation 3:19. Let us not be troubled by judgment, my brothers and sisters. Judgment is merely rendering a decision between what's right and what's wrong. If our perceptions are scary and fearful, without regards to understanding what judgment is, my brothers and sisters, then it's time to embrace the truth. And it is merely to determine between right and wrong, to step away from the things that are wicked. Warnings are merely information for you to consider when making a decision. In other words, if you decide to go one way, what are the consequences or benefits? Versus going another way, what are the consequences or benefits? So Yashar'al, as end times ramp up, as uncertainty increases, we must be mindful of that there are certain things that must be refined within the body of the set-apart awakening nation of Yashar'al. And these things will come as severe to some, or as merely serious meat and instruction to improve worship, for us to obey the Almighty Creator as instructed by Him. In this segment, July 22nd, 2020, of Judgment Warnings and Instructions, I want to bring your attention to the House of Yahuah. The House of Yahuah. And many of us have probably heard or read 1 Peter 4:17 that says judgment begins at the house of Yahuah first. I want to submit to you that's inside and outside. And we must, my brothers and sisters, we must begin to identify what that house is. But before I get into this any further, let me read the following disclaimer. Warning and disclaimer: the information contained in White Robes family represent instructions and warnings to individuals who believe they are drawn by the Almighty Creator Yahuah to Yahusha Mashyach. Referencing John 6:44, the content presented centers around end-time realities. Please be advised this site is not intended for children under 16 years of age to be compliant with various media platforms. By continuing forward, you agree to hold Symmanayah harmless of any influence in or actions that arise as a result of watching, listening, and or viewing the content presented. The views expressed do not reflect the owners, management, or shareholders of this media platform. Please note, I am not affiliated with anyone or organization with similar names. With that said, let's get started. Are you aware that the House of Yahuah, if you are one who seek to do His will, if you are one who are drawn by the Almighty Creator Yahuah to Yahusha Mashyach, are you aware that the person in the mirror is the House of Yahuah, and that the collective body as a whole, set apart nation, is the House of Yahuah? If not, I submit to you, these words are true. You are the House of Yahuah. I am the House of Yahuah. We are the House of Yahuah. And in the discipline that is promised in Hebrews 12th chapter and Revelations 3:19, in the instructions that are given us to walk filled with the Spirit and to walk in obedience, I say to you, this house must be clean or must be going through a cleaning process. And I submit to you, each and every one of us, as long as the flesh war against the spirit, as long as we are in these earthen vessels, there's a spiritual battle going on. And in that spiritual battle comes the discipline as well as the strength of set apartness by the Spirit of our Almighty Father Yahuah. And I say to you, my brother, my sister, each moment we must judge. We must decide which direction we're going. What steps will we take? How are we being guided? My brothers and sisters, let me ask you this question. If you were going to someone's house, apartment, tent, car, wherever that person dwelled, if you were invited to come, are you not aware that we take a lot of our abilities for granted? I submit to you, I believe if you was going to someone's house, resident, apartment, tent, car, wherever they reside, if you have eyes, you would look to see what condition that person's residence. If you have ears, you will use your ears. Do you hear dogs, birds, arguing and conflict before you enter into that person's residence? And would that not affect whether you draw closer to go ahead and step inside? So you're judging the outward environment before you step into it. And when you step into that residence or house, do you not look around? Do you not use your eyes, your ears, even your nose? And that determines whether you stay or not. And if the person offered you drink or food based on the condition of the living environment, you would make a decision whether to reject it, maybe politely and say no thank you, or consume it. Hear these words, O Yashar'al. The Almighty Father has given us natural and literal abilities to examine things, to judge things, to determine whether we want to step into something or not. And so it is as we go to one's physical dwelling place, so do we do the same when we enter into fellowship one with another. So I submit, this house of Yahuah, this earthen vessel, if we were to meet, will we not look at each other? Will we not listen to see what one another is saying? Will we not smell? If the person is reeking, it would be a distraction in the fellowshipping with that person. If the person has some smell well or cologne or perfume that's alluring, it can be a distraction. If the person is clean, it makes for a pleasant encounter. So shall it be with the house of Yahuah. Let me continue. My brothers and sisters, 1 Peter says, because it is time for judgment to begin from the house of the Almighty One, and if firstly from us, what is the end of those who do not obey the good news of the Almighty One? And if the righteous one is scarcely saved, where shall the wicked and the sinner appear? So then, those who suffer according to the desire of the Almighty One should commit their lives to a trustworthy Creator in doing good. Yashar'al, my brothers and sisters, let me make a correction here, because I rarely do video editing after the fact, after I've recorded. But Yashar'al, my brothers and sisters, it would behoove us, it would be to our best interest to recognize how much the Most High provides us with information on making us stronger. In other words, my brothers and sisters, we have the scriptures in their literal sense. And we have the spiritual meaning as they are made alive. So if it begins at the house of Yahuah, we must ask ourselves, what is the house of Yahuah? If it starts with us first, and if individually we are a house of Yahuah, then the camp, if indeed it is a set-apart camp, set-apart community, set-apart fellowship, collectively that camp, that community, that group, if they are indeed set apart drawn by the Almighty Father to Yahushua Mashyach, they represent a house. And if camps come together collectively, the more the group grows collectively, we are the house of Yahuah. And if judgment begins first, I submit to you, my brothers and sisters, judgment will begin with the leadership of each group, each fellowship first. For the leader of that group, community, or camp represents the shepherd, the head, the leader of that camp. We will witness set-apart leaders that are stumbling and falling. We will witness set-apart leaders who may have strayed or stumbled or fallen. Receive discipline, repent, and be renewed. We will witness some face sickness to death. We will witness some humble themselves, repent, and take on different positions because they may find themselves in the wrong position. We will even witness some leaders passing the leadership baton, so to speak, as Yashar'al began to merge and began to gather. You see, O Yashar'al, we speak of leaving Babylon. We speak of the gathering from the four corners of the earth. Some speak of the final exodus. And it requires work. It requires things that must be done. Here are some questions to consider, my brothers and sisters. The house of Yahuah. What do you do? And you see here, my brothers and sisters, again, I should have proofread it. I will ask your forgiveness as I correct this slide. And I think for the sake of time going forward after this one, I would speak over the typo. For I believe you would get it unless it's something that is critical. My brothers and sisters, questions to consider. You see, you hear me talk about the realities. There's a lot of us talking about obey the laws, the 10 Commandments, laws, statutes. There's a lot of us talk about love. But there's more compromising and tolerance of wickedness than we realize. End times are getting extreme to humble us, to cause us to draw closer to the Almighty Father and discern what He is saying. And as a result, we will see there will be some tough decisions we must make regarding correction, reproof, repentance, purging, or coming away. Now, let's go through these questions. What do you do when approaching one's house or residence before entering? As I stated, do you not look around? Do you not use your eyes, ears, even nose in making a decision to draw closer or not? Do you not judge what you are walking up to? What action do you take upon entering? Do you just walk in someone's house, apartment, or wherever they reside and make yourself at home? Or do you look around? Do you examine? I submit to you the same things you do when entering literally someone's place. Let us begin to do that with all sincerity as we come into fellowship with one house of Yahuah to another house of Yahuah. One brother, sister, fellowshipping with another. Let us examine it. Do you use your eyes, ears, nose, and mouth? Have you ever looked more thoroughly if spending the night? If you're going to spend more time with that person? You see, some of the bad relationships women and men get into is because they did not examine the house thoroughly. They did not purge. They did not vet. They did not ask questions enough. And they found themselves in spending the night falling into sin. If moving in or staying for a long term, are you concerned with what you will be eating? The same with the house of Yahuah. We should be concerned with the words we share with one another, how we interpret the scriptures as we eat the living word of Yahuah. Would you turn around if you thought it was not safe? Again, a typo with thought. But I say to you, is there a degree of trust shown to your host, the same should be as we come together. A degree of trust, but we must examine and vet. My brothers and sisters, I mentioned before how the feast times, and you will see me talk about it often, that there is a stair-step sequential purpose in the feast that can help us to understand how to stand firm in our position in these tabernacles and set apartness. I want you to understand there are different booths and tabernacles based on how we govern ourselves. But here is an excerpt of the Feast of Tabernacle, or some will say the Feast of Booth. Leviticus 23:39 through 43. On the 15th day of the 7th new moon. Leviticus 23, verse 39 through 43. On the 15th day of the 7th new moon, when you gather in the fruit of the land, celebrate the festival of Yahuah for 7 days. On the first day is a rest, and on the 8th day a rest. And you shall take for yourselves on the first day the fruit of good trees, branches of palms, twigs, leaf trees, willows of stream, and you shall rejoice before Yahuah, your Almighty One, for 7 days. And you shall celebrate it as a festival to Yahuah for 7 days in the year, a law forever in your generations. Celebrate it in the 7th new moon. Dwell in booths. Notice how he had you gather the things that will help you to sustain yourself while in the booth. Notice how he said fruit from the good trees, palm trees, twigs, leafy trees, things to sustain yourself while in that booth. He said, you dwell in the booth for 7 days. All who are native born in Yashar'al dwell in booth, so that your generations know I have made the children of Yashar'al dwell in booth, dwell in safety. When I brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim, I am Yahuah, your Almighty One. You see, my brothers and sisters, it's more than just dwelling in the booth. It's more than just gathering food and the things we need while in that booth for 7 days. It's more to it. And the booth is a dwelling place. And I submit to you, my brothers and sisters, you have the literal, thus the difference in booth, and you have the spiritual, which allows us to see that this inward man in this earthen vessel, and indeed in itself is a booth. And there is safety. As we walk, as our footsteps are established by the Almighty Father, we find safety in this tabernacle, in this booth. This should also be the same in the prospective communities, fellowships, groups, assemblies, my brothers and sisters. Consider these words. Acts 17:24, Yahuah who made the world and all that is in it. This one being master of heaven and earth does not dwell in dwellings made with hands. Here we see a transition of our focus to not just look at the natural dwelling place, but the place where Yahuah is dwelling. And I submit to you that is within us through Yahusha Mashyach. 2 Corinthians 6:16 saying, what union has the dwelling place of the Almighty One with idols? For you are a dwelling place of the living Almighty One. As the Almighty One has said, I shall dwell in them and walk among them, and I shall be their Almighty One, and they shall be my people. Ephesians 3:14 through 19. That was 2 Corinthians 6:16 I just read. Ephesians 3:14 through 19 says, for this reason I bow my knees to the Father of our Master Yahushua Messiah, from whom all fatherhood in the heavens and earth is named, in order that he may give you, according to the riches of his esteem, by power to be strengthened in the inner man through his Spirit. Inner man through his Spirit, that the Messiah might dwell in your hearts through belief, having become rooted and grounded in love, in order that you might be strengthened to firmly grasp with all the set apart ones what is the width and length and depth and height, to know the love of Messiah, which surpasses knowledge, in order that you might be filled to all the completeness of the Almighty One. Yashar'al, know your house, know the house of Yahuah, know the tabernacle. End times are here, and I shout and proclaim that judgment has begun, a judgment that refines the set-apart children of Yahuah, a judgment that proves to bring vengeance. For it is written, vengeance is mine, saith the Almighty Father. A time where wrath will come to be. To the children of Yahuah, we are not appointed to wrath, as the scriptures are written. But make no mistake, he reigns on the just and unjust. It will be our perception and true defining moments that lets us know, in spite of all that is happening, this is the plan of the Almighty Father. For us, it is discipline. To the wicked, those outside of set apartness, it would be vengeance and wrath. Do not fall for people that would tell you, oh, we're going to all be physically saved. We'll be out the way. My brothers and sisters, we'll be saved in spirit. These earthen vessels, some of us will face death through many ways and shapes and forms. We are not the person who decides who lives or dies. Are we not aware of Deuteronomy 8:3, which man does not live by bread alone, but every word that proceeds out of the mouth of the Almighty Father? Every word. Let us consider current conditions and begin to establish our steps, my brothers and sisters. Soon we will see, we won't have time to keep looking back, turning our head, speaking of the things that happened yesterday or last year. End times will prove we must be mindful and know when to come away and be alert. Let me read Matthew 23:25-28. It says, woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you clean the outside of the cup or dish, but inside they are filled with plunder and unrighteousness. Blind Pharisees, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, so that the outside of them become clean too. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly indeed look well, but inside are filled with dead men's bones and all uncleanness. So you too outwardly indeed appear righteous to men, but inside you are filled with hypocrisy and lawlessness. I say to you, my brothers and sisters, the Pharisees, scribes, these are individuals who are influential leaders. And I stated the House of Yahuah, how it's important to clean the inside and the outside. We must be mindful of both. There must be balance, O Yashar'al. And end times will prove that it will come. Prepare to witness individually and collectively a disciplined house. Consider part of what I'm saying right now, getting ready to read in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 7-11. Hebrews 12, 7-11. But I encourage you to read the entire chapter. It says, if you endure discipline, the Almighty One is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom a father does not discipline? But if you are without discipline, of which have become shares, then you are illegitimate and not sons. Moreover, we indeed had fathers of our flesh disciplining us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not much rather be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they indeed discipline us for a few days as seemed best to them, but he who does it for our profit, so that we might share his apartness. For indeed no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but grievous. But afterwards it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Yashar'al, my brother, my sister, discipline. Let us focus on discipline as something that is making us new, that is fashioning us to be renewed in the strength and power and might of set apartness by the instructions of the Almighty Father. My brothers and sisters, Yashar'al, there are ways and means for inspecting a house correctly. We must study, pray. We must learn what it is to subject ourselves one to another, as mentioned in Ephesians 5:21. It is as the Spirit of Yahuah works through you to me, or me to you, or someone else to us. We must learn that subjecting ourselves one to another is about identifying when the Spirit of Yahusha, our teacher, our comforter, is working in us one towards another. We must begin to look at the natural, intuitive things, the instinctive things that we do if we was approaching someone's house, looking around. What do we see? What do we hear? What do we smell? What condition is it? What's happening around it? These are questions we must ask with our own bodies when approaching another, knowing how to respond, how to react. There's a similarity, my brothers and sisters. And as end times ramp up, it would be wise for us to begin to not take for granted our encounters, not take for granted each thing that we encounter. For soon and very soon, my brothers and sisters, every step that we make will prove to yield a benefit, will prove to benefit the growing body of Yashar'al, improving in worship and obedience. The 144,000 will be gathered, my brothers and sisters, and we will witness it, those who are physically alive. Contributing factors for our house face, I should say the face of our house. Contributing factors that we face in our house. Famine, pestilence, disease, civil unrest, economic disorder. These things are happening around us. There will be separations in movement. People will live with others who we live with, will reflect on our decisions that we make as how we treat our house. And if we live with someone together, we're under them. Together we reflect a house. You ever heard of people say, yeah, them people over there in that house? They don't pick them out individually. So we must be mindful of where we live. Lifestyles. If we hanging out with those who are not obedient to the Almighty Father, that can affect us and those who witness our actions. If our actions are not set apart, if our footsteps are not being guided to bring love and correction. Job and career changes, social distancing, change in rules and regulations, preparations and active movement, identifying leadership and living orders. There's a lot of things we will face, my brothers and sisters. There's a lot of challenges ahead. Let us know how and when to make the right decisions. Excuses are not an option, my brothers and sisters. Now consider your house. Set apart, Yashar'al. Look in the mirror. What is your condition? Are you clean? I mean, literally, physically clean. Doesn't mean you have to put on deodorant, you have to put on cologne or perfume, but are you physically clean? Even in cases where some don't have soap, you can take fresh water and freshen your body. You can take herbs and rub on your body if need be, but just refreshing the body. And if you are one who cares for your body, your house, that physical earthen vessel, would you not, to some degree, care for the physical structure that you're in? So the same care that you have it for your body. Reflect what is necessary, O Yashar'al. Begin to look at what is necessary inwardly and outwardly, and make the decisions. A lazy or slothful person is not attractive. This also goes for those who will omit yielding to set-apart instructions and guidance. My brothers and sisters, Hear, O set apart Yashar'al, out of the great divide comes a great gathering. Isaiah 11:12 talks about being gathered from the four corners of the earth. Isaiah 43:5-7 talks about being gathered from the east and the west, from the north to the south. Read the passage that is displayed, Isaiah 11:12 and Isaiah 43:7. There are other passages, my brothers and sisters. There will be a final exodus before the physical return of Yahusha HaMashiach. Believe, O set apart Yashar'al, believe set apart house inspectors and cleaners will rise. Now you might say, what are you talking about? We have an obligation to inspect ourselves, whether through a mirror, using a phone, or reflection in the water. We have an obligation to examine and judge ourselves inwardly and outwardly. This is like house inspectors. We are house inspectors to our house and to those we come in contact and fellowship. House inspectors and cleaners. How are we cleaners? When we yield, embrace, when we are able to apply the things that are correct. Are you not aware that it says the washing of water by the word? So cleaners, the word, presenting the word of Yahuah. It cleans because if we are able to discern and receive the correction, it cleans us. The washing of water by the blood of the Lamb. So through his atoning blood, we are able to rise up anew. Yashar'al, O Yashar'al, as the 144,000 come together, as the 144,000 are strengthened, we will see a cleansing. We will see us rise as inspectors, confirming this house is clean, this house is set apart. This house is part of the body of Yashar'al. This house, this gathering, this fellowship, this community is the house of Yahuah. Understand, individually and collectively, there are things that must and will come to be in these final days, O Yashar'al. Here, set apart Yashar'al. Remember, an excellent tool for discovering the condition of the house is identifying how in the feast times there's a purpose. Passover, instructions to life. If they did not follow the instructions, death would have occurred. So this was instructions to life. Unleavened bread, discerning between good and evil. How can you remove the leaven if you can't discern what's leavened and what's unleavened? Judgment, discerning between good and evil. First fruits. Some things you'll pick up on quicker than others. Some people will pick up things quicker than others. Quick responders, breakthroughs. Harvest, the awakening in numbers. As maturity is enlarged among the body of Yashar'al. Trumpet, make known, proclaim. Favor or judgment, make it known the presence of the Almighty Father. Atonement, the renewing process. Getting under the blood of the Lamb, Yahusha, and knowing this is how we're renewed. When we stumble, when we fall, we seek forgiveness. We yield to reproof. Tabernacle, understanding this structure, this house, O Yashar'al, the house of Yahuah. And if you remove, just challenge anyone. Remove any of these bullets, any of these feast times, and ask yourself, can you grow in maturity? Do you have all the tools necessary to examine and vet? If you removed any of these purposes, if you juggled them around and took them out of sequence, how can you talk about any of them if you don't know how to judge between good and evil? And if the scriptures tell us that it's Yahuah that makes it alive, how can you talk about the others if you don't understand the instructions to life, if you can't discern the instructions from Yahuah? They will come in spirit directly, or through another, or through a preacher or teacher, or through a brother or a sister. You see, there's a sequential order here. In numeric order, if you look at these set-apart times and use these when you come across individuals, you can determine the degree of that person's worship and a commitment to the Almighty Father. Yashar'al, judgment warnings and instructions. we have a responsibility. We will be held accountable of how we manage these houses. This day, choose wisely. Am I on the right side? Have I vetted those whom I'm in fellowship with? Have I yielded to the instructions from the Almighty Father to contribute towards correction? Or am I just fellowshipping in a compromising group that just make excuses for not obeying the Almighty Father? During this remaining time that we have, O Yashar'al, details and processes will rise up, things that we must recognize, things that we've taken for granted. Here, O Yashar'al, Yahuah, the Almighty Father, is indeed a consuming fire. The details, the processes. Things will get worse before they get better. Are you ready? What state of mind are you in, O Yashar'al? Pray. Seek to discern. Ask questions. It's time to rise up. Am I demonstrating the very thing I say I believe? If I believe in set apart Yashar'al, then I must recognize all that comes about the makings of a set apart nation. Pray and watch, my brothers and sisters. End times are here. The House of Yahuah. Again, think about how you approach someone's house. What you look at, what you listen to, what you smell, what you do. Whether you continue in or turn around and leave. I submit to you, consider these same attributes when it comes to guarding that earthen vessel known as your body. Examine. Don't step into something that you know the Almighty Father is not directing you. Now it is written that he prepares my table in the midst of my enemies. There are times when we find ourselves as in captivity or other situations where the Almighty Father prepares our table. In other words, he still can make us strong. We can still grow in maturity in the midst of captivity, in the midst of our enemies. But Yashar'al, Yashar'al, hear these words. It's time to take with all sincerity the house of Yahuah, that it begins. Judgment begins with his house. And I submit to you, begin to watch the collapse of some of these leaders. Begin to watch the correction with some leaders. And begin to watch some face physical death. And some become abandoned by those who are truly called and directed. Yashar'al, Yashar'al. In each decision, there's a benefit or consequences. Choose this day how you will look after the house of Yahuah, how you will govern the house of Yahuah, how you will witness the house of Yahuah being cleaned as you yield to correction by his word. The same with me, as we yield to correction by his word. Let us begin to take care of the house of Yahuah much better than yesterday. Let us recognize the details that are necessary. Fake items that we use to try to mask the condition of the house oftentimes make the house seem worse. Follow the convictions of the Almighty Father, my brothers and sisters, for as end times ramp up, we will see how he refines us, how he disciplines us. We will see how he wants his house to look. On that note, O Yashar'al, I salute your patience, your tolerance, your ability to pursue with strength the ways of the Almighty Father. I invite your questions, your comments, your fellowship. My name is Symmanayah, and I come to you in the name of Yahusha Mashyach. Make no mistake, this walk is real. End times are real. There are demands on Yashar'al. On that note, I say to you, my brother, my sister, I say to you, Shalum.